Welcome to the WDW Reflections Podcast. Here, we'd love to talk about the Walt Disney World Resort, the way we remember it, how it's changed, and why we still enjoy visiting the most magical place on Earth. So come with us on a podcast journey as we reflect on the WDW Reflections Podcast. Hey y'all, welcome to the WDW Reflections Podcast, your unofficial guide through Disney World and all things Disney memories and their connections to the parks that we know and love today. I'm Dewey, one of the hosts of this show, and coming to you from my home in Delaware, and this is episode number 60. 60, guys. Can y'all believe that? 60 episodes. I can't.
That's crazy.
60 episodes. We thank y'all for being here with us. Before we get into this week's main topic, we'd like to invite y'all to connect with us through the show's social media accounts. And don't forget, for all things WDW Reflections Podcast, head on over to our website at wdwreflectionspodcast.com. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started with the show. With me today are my podcast travel buddies, Ron and Tony. How's it going, Ron?
Hey, I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well. Just always enjoy talking Disney.
What's going on, Tony?
Hey guys, good morning. I just wanted to say hi to y'all and remind the audience about our special YouTube giveaway, which is coming very soon. Just keep an eye out for one of those shorts that Dewey mentioned. We are giving away a special little prize to one of you who might want it out there for the sake of having achieved some of our subscriber goals. We've actually exceeded it by a lot, probably due in part to the audience that's here from TikTok. Hello, TikTok audience. Just watch for one of those posts. It'll have all the rules that you'll have to follow, and hopefully by the next time that we do a show, we will pick a winner.
So this week, we're going to be switching gears just a little bit to talk about, I don't know, is it a lesser known chapter? I would say it's probably lesser known because it only lasted for a few years. But a lesser known chapter in the story of the most magical place on Earth. And that is the Walt Disney World Speedway. So safety first, fellas. Buckle up because it's going to be a heck of a ride. So nestled in the heart of Orlando, Florida, or Kissimmee, or Celebration, or whatever they call that little triangle of happiness down there, Walt Disney World is famed for its enchanting castles and magical experiences. However, back in 1995, it added a rather different attraction to its repertoire, the Walt Disney World Speedway, known affectionately as, and I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I'm a huge racing fan. I don't know if you know this or not. They had a nickname for the Walt Disney World Speedway. Do you guys know what it was?
No.
They called it the Mickyard. And
that is cool.
a playful nod to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway's nickname of the Brickyard. Because if you know anything about racing, you know that the original paving of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway over 100 years ago was all bricks. And they called it the Yard of Bricks. And that's how it became known as the Brickyard. So, you know, Disney always Mickeying up a little bit. They called their racetrack the Mickyard. I thought that was funny. After Disney's iconic Mickey Mouse. The Speedway was originally built to host the Indy 200 at Walt Disney World, an Indy Racing League event. We'll get into that more in just a couple seconds. So how did something this crazy get approved? This was a $6 million project, and I bet y'all can never guess which CEO gave this project the green light. Can you guess? Who do you think it was?
I'm going to guess it was Eisner.
Of course it was Eisner.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty sure it was Eisner.
Oh, man. Eisner was the idea man, for real. That dude had all kinds of crazy schemes. Sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. But he was never short of new ideas. So that's right. Yes.
I wouldn't be happy if Eisner would return.
Would or wouldn't?
Would be.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. He's probably like 80 years old now. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was a big fan. So now this wasn't the first time that Eisner and Disney had worked with the Indianapolis 500. Back in 1985, the Walt Disney Company cut a deal to have the 1985 Indy 500 Fest themed to the Wonderful World of Disney. So Eisner attended that Indy 500 in 1985, and he was impressed with the, get this, 500,000 fans packed into stands for the annual race. So even back then, Eisner, who in 1985 had only been the CEO for 8 months and was also a huge sports fan, knew that he needed to get the Walt Disney Company more involved in the sports world. So that was one of his priorities very early on in his tenure. He also made it a priority to make improvements to the Walt Disney World Resort. And in the 1990s, Eisner put both of these priorities into practice. So just listen to the sports-related offerings that came into existence around Walt Disney World and the Walt Disney Company in the 1990s. And see, you guys will probably remember some of this stuff. 1993, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. They bought I'm not a hockey fan, so I don't remember what they were before Disney bought them. I think they were just the Ducks, and Disney changed it to the Mighty Ducks after, of course, the Emilio Estevez movie called The Mighty Ducks. So that was in 93. 1994, Walt Disney World started the Walt Disney World Marathon for the first time. Later that year in 1994, they opened the All-Star Resort at Walt Disney World. In 1995, and part of the $19 billion acquisition of ABC, they purchased ESPN. In 1996, Disney bought the Los Angeles Angels and then renamed the team the Anaheim Angels because, of course, that's where Disneyland is located. And in 1997, Disney opened the Disney's Wide World of Sports complex in the Walt Disney World Resort. So all of those sports-related things were happening in the 90s because of Michael Eisner's love for sports, but also wanting to branch out and really get Disney involved in other forms of media and things like that. So how does this all relate to the IndyCar League? Well, remember, Eisner was very impressed with the draw of the Indianapolis 500 crowds when he attended the race in 85. So he suggested that somewhere in the 48 square miles of property that Disney owns in Florida, that they needed to build a racetrack. And he did that in the late 1980s. But the timing just wasn't right at that time because, as you guys know, in the end of the 1980s, they were in the midst of building the Disney MGM Studios, now known as Disney's Hollywood Studios. So the idea to build the racetrack in Disney World would have to wait until sometime after the park, Disney's MGM Studios, opened in 1989. So they waited for a little bit. Once 1989 came and went and the resources could be allocated to a new project, Eisner went back to the Imagineer team and said he wanted a spectacle that could help the company do a better job promoting its Florida theme parks. Something that could help lure guests to the Walt Disney World Resort during those times of year. And listen, this is a funny statement. During those times of year when attendance is really soft at the parks, and we know that doesn't exist anymore, right? But in the 1990s, remember, we still had those sweet spots. After right around Thanksgiving, it was pretty slow, and January was pretty slow. So he was wanting to find a way to lure new guests to the parks in times when the attendance was a little bit slower than normal. So with that in mind, where should the track be built? It was then that he remembered back to his Indy 500 trips that the Goodyear blimp was always present at the famous race for more than a week before the actual race day. The IndyCar had time trials and qualifying and practices and all of this stuff for up to 2 weeks before the actual Indianapolis 500 took place. And every time they had these events televised, They had shots from the Goodyear blimp. So again, Eisner thinking ahead, he's like, you know what? We need to have the Imagineers plan this project, and they need to make sure that when the Goodyear blimp flew over their track in Walt Disney World, it would have some important icons in its view. And it just so happened that there was about 125 acres of previously prepped, already graded land, which could house about 12,000 cars, but rarely ever used in the southwestern corner of the Magic Kingdom parking lot. Imagine that, a part of the Magic Kingdom parking lot that's not is rarely used. That's something you don't ever say nowadays. But back in the 90s, that was a thing. The lot was rarely used except for the busiest times of year, like 4th of July, Christmas, and New Year's, you know, back in those days at least. So if the Goodyear blimp flew over the Walt Disney World Speedway, built in the Magic Kingdom parking lot, guess what? It would have magnificent views of the Walt Disney World resorts that are around Seven Seas Lagoon and Bay Lake, and of course, of the Magic Kingdom itself. And that could mean millions of dollars of free advertising for the Walt Disney World Resort during any race that would be broadcast from that facility. So hitting several key important things here. And I'm telling you, Michael Eisner always thinking. The fact that the area was already prepped and graded, it was designed to fit within the boundaries of the existing already infrastructure, and it required minimal rerouting of existing roads, really sweetened the deal. The build could be completed much quicker and much cheaper under those conditions. So survey work began on the project in September of 1994, and plans for the track were first announced on January 23rd, 1995. And then at a press conference held just a couple months later, on April 13th of 1995, the very first race to be held at the venue, the inaugural Indy 200, was announced. That race would take place on January 27th, 1996. This date was significant because it was the day before the 1996 NFL Super Bowl. So IRL and Eisner, so IRL stands for Indy Racing League. It's their like NFL is National Football, and MLB is Major League Baseball. So IRL is the Indy Racing League. It's for IndyCar. So Eisner and Indy Racing League execs hoped that the inaugural race for the new Indy Racing League and the Walt Disney World Speedway could become an annual day before the Super Bowl tradition. So they're really thinking big here. They're thinking that this is going to become this whole thing. It's like, hey, Super Bowl's this weekend. Don't forget to watch that Disney World race, right? They're thinking it's going to become this whole tradition. So they've got plans. The track would be a 3-turn tri-oval. And so those of you that are NASCAR fans, if you've seen what the Pocono Raceway looks like in Pocono, Pennsylvania, it's very similar. This Walt Disney World Speedway is shaped very similar to Pocono, but much smaller than Pocono. Pocono is over 2 miles long. So this tri-oval, designed by Indianapolis Motor Speedway chief engineer Kevin Forbes, and the exact location and layout was chosen in September 1994 by Greg Ruse of Buena Vista Construction. Does that sound familiar? What is Buena Vista Construction? It's Disney, of course it is. Remember, Lake Buena Vista they had Lake Buena Vista Video for all their video releases. Back in the day, before it was Disney Springs, and even before it was Downtown Disney, do you guys remember what the shopping district was called? Lake Buena Vista Shopping District. So to have Buena Vista Construction, that just means Disney's building it. That's all that means. The track was situated on a triangular plot of land adjacent to the Magic Kingdom's parking lot, just around the corner from Disney's Polynesian Village Resort. On June 27th, 1995, Indianapolis Motor Speedway chairman of the board, Maury Holman George, took part in a groundbreaking ceremony and presented the track with, and this is super cool, presented the new track with one of the original paving bricks from the famous Brickyard. So a actual brick from the Brickyard went into the ground for the opening ceremonies. In a rather compact schedule, the 1 mile, which is 1.6 kilometers for you Europeans and people that don't live in America, you guys don't know what miles are, so we don't know what kilometers are. So 1 mile equals 1.6 kilometers. So the 1 mile, 1.6 kilometer track was completed with 10 miles or 16 kilometers of safety restraint cabling. So that is the steel cables that go around the track. 16 kilometers or 10 miles of that. 2 acres of fencing. 1,800 yards of concrete for the outside walls. 2,300 feet of concrete for pit walls. And 5,200 tons of asphalt for the track's racing surface. And despite 1995 having been the wettest June and July in Orlando on record, it's crazy. They had 75 inches of rain in June and July, but of course that did include Hurricane Aaron. It wasn't all just normal rain. But despite all that, the construction was completed on time, with final paving completed on October 18th of 1995. Man, I wish my local road work could be done that quick, because that's pretty speedy. The track was officially dedicated on November 28th, 1995, in a ceremony which included Indy Racing League drivers R.A. Lewandek, Eddie Cheever, Eliseo Salazar, Lynn St. James, and Davey Hamilton, and they drove a 5-car flying V formation amongst fireworks and all these opening festivities for the track. Initial testing at the facility for the Indy Racing League took place from November 27th through December 9th of 1995. So already had cars on the track racing and testing in November, just a few months. So the Speedway was quite unique. Constructed in less than a year, it was a true testament to Disney's commitment to offering these diverse attractions. The tri-oval track, which, like I said before, was a 1 mile long tri-oval and featured seating capacity for about 20,000 spectators. And it was an immediate hit, drawing crowds who were eager to experience the thrills of high-speed motorsports right in the vicinity of Disney's otherwise whimsical environment. Not to be outdone, another of America's racing leagues, NASCAR, actually held NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races there in 1997 and in 1998, which, by the way, just a side note, my wife actually got to go to one of those, so that's super cool. She was down there staying with her father for a little while and went to one of those races, so that's super cool. I'm very jealous of that. So also in its first years, in addition to hosting races, the track was also used very frequently as a year-round test facility due to the warm winter weather in Orlando. So when car owners and team owners and stuff like that wanted to go and get some laps in, maybe for a new driver or testing a new tire or something like that, then they could go use this racetrack because it's typically warm year-round there. So in the first few years, the track was getting a lot of use. So for a little while, it was quite the spectacle. But as with many stories, the initial excitement eventually began to wane. And just 5 years after it opened, it held its last major race in the year of 2000. So what exactly happened? Actually, multiple factors contributed to its decline. For one, it was quite loud. Ron, I know you've been to NASCAR races. I've attended NASCAR races with you. Tony, have you ever been to a NASCAR or Indy race or anything like that?
No, I have not. No.
So number one, you're missing out. Super cool.
You are. I will say, the real race is down in the pits. But anyway,
yeah, it's pretty cool down there. Yeah, Ron and I have spent time in the pits here at Dover before, so it's super cool.
What does that mean? Down in the pits.
In the pits, so you know what a pit stop is, right? Are you a racing fan at all?
No.
Okay, so a pit stop is when the race car comes off of the track into the pits, which is where the pit crew is. The pit crew changes tires, puts in gas, and cleans the windshield, that kind of stuff.
in seconds.
Yeah, seconds. Right now, this year with the new car in NASCAR, they're doing 4 tires and 22 gallons of fuel in just under 9 seconds.
Oh, that must be fun to watch.
So it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So to be in the pits, as Ron is referring to, requires a special ticket, and it's limited to a certain number of people because it can be dangerous down there. But you get to stand behind pit wall and literally be, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 feet away from the car as
you're on top of it.
Tires and all that stuff. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, I'm from New York. We get to see that, but in reverse, they take the tires off and take everything off the car.
Yeah, but they don't put anything back on.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's different than a pit stop.
Right.
I believe that's called theft. So, it's pretty loud. So in NASCAR, each one of the cars, trucks, whatever it is got around 700 to 800 horsepower. So imagine 30 or 40 of those running around a racetrack. It's pretty loud. Now imagine you're paying premium dollars to enjoy the Polynesian resort right around the corner from this racetrack, and you're enjoying a day at the pool. And what's all that noise? Well, that's NASCAR or that's IndyCar racing about a half a mile away from your swimming pool. So believe it or not,
that really would be. If I'm at Disney, I don't want to hear the Dover race right in the background.
I mean, I love racing and I love the sound and all that stuff. But if I am not enjoying the race, if I'm enjoying a nice leisurely day at the pool, I might be upset by all that sound.
You know what? I kind of remember pulling into the parking lot during that time and hearing those sounds. I think I do remember that.
So, and we'll talk about, you probably weren't there during a race. We'll talk about what you were probably hearing. But to discuss those multiple factors that led to its demise, one of them was definitely the noise. Anyone that's ever been to a live auto race knows about the sound of dozens of those 800 horsepower cars and how loud it can be. Nearby resort guests complained about the noise regularly, not just on race days. Also, it had logistical challenges. So limited seating capacity that couldn't be expanded due to its proximity to the Magic Kingdom was a bit of an issue. And moreover, Disney was evolving, focusing more on its core brand of family-friendly entertainment rather than high-octane sporting events. So after the year 2000 IRL season, series officials and Walt Disney World were not able to come to an agreement for a race date for the 2001 IRL event. IRL officials, and remember, every time I say IRL, that's Indy Racing League. I just want to make sure y'all remember that. IRL officials were unsatisfied with the January date as it was seen as it to be too early for most of the teams to be prepared for the season. This was the first race of the IRL season each year. And it was so early that some teams were having difficulty being prepared for it. And not to mention, there was typically a 6-week gap until the second race of the season. So that's not real convenient, I guess you could say. It's not great scheduling, but Disney World was really set on that date because remember, Eisner was wanting to draw in people during that lull after Christmas. And IRL wanted it closer to their actual season start, which was 6 weeks later. That's a pretty big gap. The NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series had already declined to renew their contract with the Speedway for similar reasons after 1998 because, again, the Chrysler Truck Series race was in January also, again, paired with that lull or that slow time in park attendance that Eisner was trying to perk up. So NASCAR had already decided that they were not going to renew after their 97 and 98 races. So the talks quietly ceased between IRL and Disney, and the race was not rescheduled for 2001. And ultimately, it was removed from the IRL schedule permanently. And then, in a twist of irony, one of the reasons the spot was chosen for the site, the proximity to the Magic Kingdom, with all those great views from the Goodyear blimp and having the parking available because it wasn't being used. Guess what? Traffic became a major problem as the Magic Kingdom continued to become more and more popular. Since the race spectators would be arriving at the same time and the same place as regular theme park and visitors were coming in, overflow parking was required. In 1996 and 1997, Disney officials reacted by parking all race spectators. Y'all listen to this, you're going to love this. All the race spectators got to park in the Magic Kingdom parking lot. All visitors to the Magic Kingdom were sent to the Epcot parking lot. And Rod, I could see your face. So
I would not have been happy.
Right? Imagine you are a Magic Kingdom guest going in for the day and you're trying to drive up to the Magic Kingdom parking lot and they're turning you away and telling you to go to park at Epcot.
And that's during the anniversary year of all things, 96, 97.
Right, absolutely. So things were speeding up, right? So race spectators would be able to walk to the nearby speedway, while all guests of the Magic Kingdom were required to take the Disney monorail or a Disney bus from the Epcot parking lot. Now, starting in 1998, Disney realized that maybe this wasn't the best plan, so they flipped it around. Spectators to the race were diverted to park at Epcot and then were taken by shuttle bus to the Speedway. Visitors to the Magic Kingdom were directed to the park as usual in the Magic Kingdom parking lot. But as you can imagine, both plans received many, many complaints. If you're a Magic Kingdom guest parking at Epcot, you're not happy. If you are a Walt Disney World Speedway guest parking at Epcot, you're not happy. So both plans ultimately were not well received from the people that had to utilize said plan. So there's another nail in the coffin, right? But it wasn't all doom and gloom, even though the sanctioned races began to fall off the schedule. There were still a few good years left for the Speedway, as it also had other offerings when it wasn't being used to host races. On February 7th, 1997, and Tony, this is probably what you heard during some of your visits, the first racing experience program, the Richard Petty Driving Experience, opened at the Speedway. The Richard Petty Driving Experience is a stock car-based racing organization that allows the general public to drive real NASCAR machines or cars or whatever, or ride along with a professional driver. With its success at the track, some new support facilities actually debuted in 1999. A new visitor center and gift shop was built to permanently house operations for the driving experience. And a new garage facility was also built, as for the first 2 years, they had previously worked out of trailers and tents inside the track's infield. I can tell you that I think it was for his birthday back in the early 2000s, we got my father-in-law, we took him to the Richard Petty Driving Experience and got to do that. And it was just being able, I sat there and was just watching him do it. And it was, 3 or 4 hours. And it being a NASCAR fan, it was a whole lot of fun. So that was something that was well received at the track, and I personally got to experience it, and it was a lot of fun. Then on November 13th of 2008, it was announced that the track would share the racing experiences with the Indy racing experience, a similar program to the Richard Petty driving experience, only this time using IndyCar two-seater machines that would be used for the ride-alongs. And Indy cars would also be available to be driven by fans. So you could ride along with the professional driver, or you could drive an Indy car yourself. After appearing at various tracks on a largely irregular schedule, the Indy racing experience would make the Walt Disney World Speedway its permanent year-round home after just a couple of years. So it was pretty popular there. The Richard Petty driving experience actually has locations in multiple tracks around the country. On January 16th of 2012, another new driving experience started business at Walt Disney World Speedway, geared towards high-end supercars, and this was called the Exotic Driving Experience. Modifications were made to the Speedway's infield to create an exotics course, and which is a 1 mile layout that runs clockwise and combines part of the oval with a street style course. So instead of running just the tri-oval that the racing series has had previously, they built a little bit of a road course on the inside of the what they call the inside the track, and it used part of the oval and part of this newly built road course. Unfortunately, there were also several accidents that happened at the track, and this would be probably the third reason why we eventually saw the demise of the Walt Disney World Speedway. During a week of preseason testing on January 11th of 1997, IRL driver Eliseo Salazar crashed in turn 1, and he suffered a fracture of his lower back, and he missed 2 races of that season. 2 weeks later, on January 23rd of 1997, IRL driver Davy Jones broke his neck after a practice crash in turn 3. Then on January 6th of 2000, IRL driver Sam Schmidt, and this one's unfortunate, he was paralyzed after a crash in preseason testing. So 3 IRL-related racing accidents. But the most tragic of them all came in August of 2015. Gary Terry, who was a manager at the Exotic Driving Experience at the Walt Disney World Speedway and a driving instructor, died in a crash on August 9th of 2015. Terry was in the passenger seat of a Lamborghini that a 24-year-old guest was piloting when he lost control, spinning 3 times and hitting a guardrail. The guardrail entered the passenger side of the vehicle and unfortunately killed Mr. Terry, who was the driving instructor. This accident is probably what spelled the end of the Walt Disney World Speedway. So, in late 2015, fans of the Speedway had to say their final goodbyes as it was permanently closed. Officially, it was announced that the closure was to make way for transportation improvements within the resort, specifically to enhance access to the Magic Kingdom. But obviously that was not the only reason. There had been other things piling up over the first several years. Either way, it marked the end of an era for Disney's venture into motorsports. Even though the Walt Disney World Speedway is no longer there, its legacy lives on. It was a place where racing enthusiasts and Disney fans came together. The track might be gone, but the memories created there continue to fuel the passion for racing in many, many racing lovers' hearts. And for me personally, I love how the Walt Disney Company of the 1990s was never afraid to push the boundaries. I mean, who would have thought, hey, you know what Walt Disney World needs? A racetrack. You know what I mean? Like nobody, I don't even know how that even comes up. But to me, it's fascinating how Disney tried something so different from its usual offerings. it just goes to show the dynamic nature of the theme parks and entertainment spaces, that they're always evolving, sometimes in unexpected ways. Sadly, in my opinion, that's something that's sorely missed from today's Disney's leadership. Michael Eisner was a visionary. That guy just he never stopped having ideas. And the Walt Disney World Speedway, although it didn't last very long. I mean, I guess it lasted 20 years, right? 20 no. I'm not good at math.
About 10 years now.
1995 to 2015.
15.
So,
okay, yeah.
the track itself lasted that long. It only held actual races for 5 years, but the track was pretty cool. I got to experience it. I didn't drive on it, but I got to experience my father-in-law doing it, and it was a lot of fun. And I'd actually always planned on doing it, and it was one of those things that every year my wife would say, "Do you want to do it this year?" And I'd say, "Nah, let's spend the money on the kids, instead," because it was relatively expensive. It was several $100s to do it. And every year my wife would say, "Hey, you want to do it this year?" And I would choose to, we would do a dining, character dining or something that the whole family could enjoy rather than just me. And I always said, I'll do it next year, until there was no more next years.
You didn't do it?
I never drove it. No, I never did it.
I thought you did.
No, never
It
did.
must have been your father-in-law that
Yes.
did it then, that I remembered thinking you did it.
He probably did it, gosh, I want to say 2001 to 2002, something like that. Somewhere early 2000s. We got married, my wife and I got married in 2000, and it was definitely after that. So sometime in the early 2000s. But I never did it, and that's something that I will always regret. I mean, I'm one of those in my
Say that again. When did you get married?
I got married in 2000.
Wow.
What?
I just didn't realize that you had just were fairly newlywed when.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. So we got married in 2000. My son was born in 2003. So I think 2003 or so is about the time that the three of us started being friends. So yeah, I was pretty much a newlywed at that time. So that's something
Sorry,
no, that's fine. That's something that I regret. I wish I could have done it, but I was being a good dad and letting the kids use our limited funds. We did something as a family rather than doing it on just me. So I didn't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Dover doesn't do something like that.
They do actually. They do have a driving experience. They don't do it year round here at Dover, but every race weekend they offer it on Monday.
Oh, wow.
So you can, I guess they figure people are in town for the race, so they offer it for the weekend. So you can do it here at Dover.
One of the funnest things I did when I was in Dover for the race there. Remember when Chrysler was showcasing some of their upper end cars?
They had the Dodge Vipers out there.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I don't know how many tires they went through because, man.
So, Tony, I am moving in 2025. That means there's only one more chance. If you want to go to a race here at Dover, you can come down, stay with me for the weekend, and I'll take you to the races. It's they haven't announced the 2025 schedule yet, but it's typically the last part of April, early part of May. So I'm extending that invitation to you if you're interested. Ron, if you want to make it a WDW Reflections podcast
Seriously,
event,
wouldn't that be fun?
Then the three of us can go to the race together. Let's talk about that. All right, so that's it for this week's main segment. Like I said, I'm a huge racing fan. I don't know if you guys noticed, in honor of today's show, I'm wearing a racing shirt and a racing hat. I'm wearing my I'm a Brad Keselowski fan in NASCAR, so I'm wearing all the Keselowski gear for. I always wear it on Sundays anyway for race days, so I'm wearing that in honor of today's episode about the Walt Disney World Speedway. So
I'm glad we went over this one today because I actually was a little bit confused when you mentioned that we were going to be talking about the Speedway. I thought you meant the actual attraction in the park, the Speedway. Isn't that what it's
Tomorrowland
called?
Speedway.
Tomorrowland Speedway. So I
Yeah.
thought that's what we were going to do. And then I started Googling it and I found the Speedway in Orlando by Disney World. So that's not what the gas station. So we're not looking for that.
Yes, not the. There's also a gas
Not
station
the
called
Speedway gas
Racetrack.
station.
That's
So you
So I
funny.
got
was like,
Speedway,
okay.
you've got Racetrack. We're not talking about either of those either.
So I'm glad that we got to hear about this one because I do remember the sound. I actually remember even the smell of the oil. I remember going into the parking lot and in the 90s, and there was a smell coming, an oil smell coming from that area. So that's
And Ron can tell you that that's part of the racing experience.
Yeah.
When you're at a race live, the sound, obviously, I mean, you can feel it in your chest, just the rumble, but the smell of gas and rubber burning, and it's just, it's exhilarating. I love the racing experience. So yes, that's, so you probably did hear that if you were there in the 90s, which I know you were.
yeah.
You probably were there. You were probably seeing or hearing the Richard Petty driving experience.
Yes, I remember the
Yeah.
sign as I was driving in. That's interesting.
That's cool. So good stuff. I wanted to do that one because Walt Disney World Speedway gone but not forgotten.